Welcome to today's webinar. This is Erica, and today's webinar is going to focus on managing rates and restrictions, one of our new functions that we've introduced in our latest release. We want to make sure that you all have a good sense of how it works, how to set it up, and how to use it to manage your rates, your restrictions, and allocate different rates to different channels. So today we have Dave and Ryan here to discuss the new manage restrictions feature and our manage rates function. Dave's going to be kicking us off with an overview of the new manage restrictions function, how to set them up, and how to use child rates with the manage restrictions. And then we're going to hand it over to Ryan, who's going to give us some examples on how you can use these new restrictions, best practices for managing rates, and then also give you some strategies on how you can use rate allocations to your different channels, and how you can differentiate rates and make them the most strategic for your property. So I'm going to hand it over to Dave, who's going to kick us off. So thanks everyone for coming.
All right. So what we've got here is a little test system that I just wanted to kind of walk you through where the settings are and give you an overview of really we're talking about what we added in the recent release with the ability to control restrictions independently of the rate and what that can do for you. So what you're going to want to do first to activate the feature is go into your setup area. So you click on that top corner there, and it's going to be under your settings tab and your general settings. And so what we've got here is child rate restrictions, yes. So essentially that's turned on. If it was set to no, which I think by default it is, you just click edit and you could toggle that to wherever you needed it. Once you have that feature turned on, when you're in your rates area, you will now have a new little checkbox here for manage restrictions under your manage rates section. So what you can do is you can turn that on, and then you're going to actually see in here you have your general rack rates, but you can also have a child rate in there. So typically without that on, you wouldn't see any child rates because there was no independent management of that. It was just a link to the parent rate. And again, a child rate is just a derived rate. It's derived value based off how it's set up from these primary rates up here, these parent rates. So if I check that and then I view it for this week, you can see I get just a restriction window, and I can adjust the minimum stay, the maximum stay, a close to arrival, which means a booking cannot start on a given day, or a closed through. This means the booking cannot stay on that day. So if you have a closed, like this one on Sunday and Monday, you have no bookings that can extend into a Sunday or start on a Sunday, Monday. They just can't cross that date at all. It's just like an out of order. The room is not available that's linked to that rate. Really, it's just a rate plan, so just want to be clear about that. So if you have multiple rates on a room type, the room would still be available, but not using that, whatever that promotional or that child rate that you have set up. So let's turn that off for a minute, and you can look at what it would be like here without. You only get the primary rates or the parent rates, and you can see here you get the full changing the values as well as updating these restriction areas down here. So I just want to kind of cover how that's done, as well as, since this is maybe new to a few of you, you might need to create those child rates. And to actually add those in, you would click on the default rate, and here you have a list of all the rates that are sort of set in the system, your primary rates as well as this single child king rate. Why don't we add a child queen rate? So I'm just going to go add child rate, rate ID, call it child queen, description, and then it needs to know what that's linked to. So this child rate, again, it's just a derived rate based off the parent rate or the primary rate. So we're going to set that as the queen. And then I have an adjustment type. Because it's linked, I can therefore set it as a percentage like -10. So it would always be 10% less than whatever you've managed the queen rate at in this scenario. If you just want to manage it for a restriction, a separate restriction rate, so you can close out a rate that you're sending somewhere, you could set that as, you know, a 0. And so it's just a duplicate of the same value, but then you're going to be able to have independent restrictions on it. We do allow you to set your closed to arrival or your minimum stays now, and that would just default, roll it out for the next year and a half. But you can always manage those restrictions once you've created it. So I'm just going to set this one as a -10, just so you can kind of get a sense of how that works. So once we save that rate, it gets added into your default rates, and then it's also viewable wherever you choose to allocate it. The one thing that you want to make sure you do when you create new rates, either a new primary rate or a new child rate, is put it in a rate group right here. And what that does is it categorizes it so you can see it in different parts of the software as well in the manage rates area. So if I edit this and I just call this child, then we know what it is, what group it's part of. If I go back to my default rates and I update this one as well, what we do is we get a nice clean setup there, so all the rates are within groups. So if you look at that, they have a different rate group attached to them. The nice thing about that is when I'm in my manage rates and I want to manage a section, I can click on the top to select all of them. So if I choose that, I can then click on and manage all my child rates. I can view multiple restrictions at the same time. I can say all my child rates are going to be closed to arrive on Sunday and Monday. And that means nobody can make a reservation on Sunday or Monday using a child rate. They could use the primary rate, which might be a different value. So that's sort of the idea behind that. Once you've created those and you need to see what these values are, you can then look at your rate grid and you can view all rates. Refresh it, you can see the child rates are now inserted into this view, so you can kind of get a view all, and then you can see the actual rate values in here. And you can see the way this one is set up, the king rate and the child of the king is at a 0%. So it's the same rate, but we can have independent restrictions on it. The queen rate, which is a 10% discount off of this parent queen, so it's $12.50 off. And you can see that rate just tracks it. So I only have to manage the one rate, and the child rate will always track the value, which is a kind of a nice feature there. So here's where you can view the work you've done and see the values. If I wanted to see what my restrictions were, I can show the extended details and just refresh the page. And what it does is you get an exploded view of each rate plan and the restrictions on it. You can see I have the Y down here in the boxes, for these bottom two, which means yes, this is a closed rate on the Sunday and Monday as I set up when I was creating it there. So it's just another way to pay attention to how you set up your rates and then where you can use them. Now you have multiple rates with different abilities to close them out. It could become very beneficial in distribution. So I just want to make sure you're aware of that. This closed feature is new. We never had that one before the release last Sunday. The close to arrival has always been there. That allows you to block it out for arrivals on certain days. Also, with all this, I just want to make sure if you kind of, after this, you can rewatch the video, but also when you're in your front desk area, you can always click the help button. You get to our support area, it opens in a new tab or window based on your browser. From this point on, if you want to learn more about that, I would click on the documentation. That takes you to our documentation page where you can read about the new rate restrictions, and you can do that just by typing in the word rate or rate. Click on, what would it be here? Managing rates, rate grid. Any one of the rate options will get you into the rate section where you can then just kind of go into the restrictions area. Just a quick way to get in there and see all the documentation associated with the new manage rate screen. I think that's all I have now, and I'm going to pass it over to Ryan, and Ryan can cover how you can utilize this new tool, manage rate restrictions, how you can utilize it in distribution and OTAs, how it can benefit you moving forward with that ability to close things out. Let me go ahead and switch this over. Just give me one moment.
I think I got it, Dave.
Oh, you got it? Excellent, Ryan.
All right, perfect. All right, well, thank you, Dave. I appreciate it. And again, one of the biggest drivers for this particular feature with child restrictions, basically managing restrictions at the child level, was primarily for third-party channels. So number one is now we have child rate support for both, for the OTAs and GDS. So if you want child rate support for Booking.com, Expedia, as well as the GDS and some other channel connects, that now exists. And so the most, I guess the most popular example that a lot of properties are utilizing with this is essentially either minimum stay requirements for child rates, or you're actually closing off specific weekends, weeks, or months for third-party channels. All right. So, for example, what a lot of people will do is, the background is, you're basically sold out, let's say, for the month of August. So starting today on August 1st, you're basically sold out on every weekend for the month of August. You really don't need Booking.com or Expedia. And so what you can essentially do is go into your child rates, the two that were already set up, and we'll just take actually the King right now, for example. And if you wanted to go in for the month of August, you could essentially just go in and close those 2 weekends out. So you'll simply just check the box for closed for yes, for Friday, Saturday. And you click that save button. And now what that will do is that will close that out for the child King rate. And we would actually have to assist in the mapping of these child rates for you, but you simply have to either give us a call or create a support ticket within our support portal at support.bookingcenter.com, and we could easily remap. And we've actually done that for a number of properties since our release, just even in the last few days. So essentially what it does is, what a lot of properties will do is they will create a child rate. And as Dave mentioned, the first example we originally had was the child King. The child King was originally set up where there was essentially zero adjustment. So as Dave mentioned earlier, that just means that there's actually no difference in your rack rate. So you're literally going to be giving the same rate that you would, whether it be to your front desk, to Booking.com, to Expedia, or to your website. So anytime you have adjust by zero at the child rate level, your rates will essentially be the exact same. But what can change and what can differentiate at this stage is your restrictions. So the example I just gave, you could go in and close out all of your weekends for the month of August for, let's say, Booking.com and Expedia. Yet on your website or your front desk, that would not be the case. Okay? So the second strategy around that is the example that Dave created for you, which was the child Queen. In this case, there's an adjustment of -10. For a lot of the various OTAs, typically that would be either a flat rate bump or a percentage bump. So let's say a 10% higher rate. So what it allows you to do, it's a combination both of increasing your rates, or in this case, decreasing your rates for a specific channel, but then also being able to go in and changing your restrictions for that. Okay. So again, in the example here, you can either do the closed to arrival, the closed. You could obviously do the closed to arrival above, or if you just want to do a minimum stay requirement for Labor Day, for a holiday long weekend, you now have the ability to do that. Okay. So again, as Dave mentioned, just to summarize what we went over, you would create a new child rate. You would just give an adjustment by zero, if that was the case. If there was essentially no change to the actual rate, you want to give that same rate, you just wouldn't change anything here. You go back to your manage rates, click the manage restrictions, choose the one or if there are multiple ones that you want. And again, just like when you're managing rates for your parent rates, you just would control the restrictions here, whether it be minimum stay requirements, maximum stay requirements, arrivals, and the close flag. And again, what a lot of properties we find are doing right now is, and there's actually another example, where a property only wanted to give 60 days of availability to a particular OTA channel. So what the property would do is essentially from October until the end of this year, they would close out availability specifically for that child rate that was allocated to that specific OTA channel. Okay. And as Dave mentioned, you can always go, once you've completed the managed rates, you can always go back to the rate grid. If you click the show extended details, depending on what the channel was, you can actually view that information. Okay, so the minimum stay would show here, max stay, your closed to arrivals, and then your closed as well. The one caveat I did want to mention is that with child rates, just like with parent rates for any third-party channel, BookingCenter does have to assist with the mapping. So if you do create a child rate is a new rate plan, that you'd have to communicate with our support team on what channel you would like that new rate plan to be mapped to. So for rate parity issues, what a lot of properties will do is if you're participating both with Expedia and Booking.com, what you would do is you essentially use the same rate plan for both those channels, but you certainly don't have to. The beauty of this, you can still keep the rates the same, but you can still, if you wanted to close that availability in Booking.com but not Expedia or vice versa, these new manage restriction and manage rate tools will allow you the ability to do that. All right. Erica, at this stage, I'd just like to open it up to questions. Did anyone have any specific questions regarding how this would work, or there's additional clarity that someone would needed?
Did you want to just touch on yield management for a minute and explain some of the features of that?
Absolutely, certainly. All right, so you'll notice here that within our rates tab, to the right of default rates management, we have yield management and the yield grid. So what the yield management module allows you to essentially control your rates by specific factors based on both occupancy levels, time, as well as occupancy and time as well. So what a lot of properties will do, if their occupancy levels are high, obviously you want to increase your rates, and if they're low, perhaps you want to decrease your rates. So, and again, yield management is completely tied in, and it's actually done at the rate plan level as well. So if you wanted to mix and match yield management, you'd have the ability to do that by channel if you wanted to go that route. Okay. So what a lot of properties will do, I'll give you a relatively simple example, but let's just say that you wanted to do where occupancy is above 50%. All right, so if you wanted to do an occupancy only where occupancy was above 50%, all right, you can adjust the percentage, let's say by 15%. All right. So essentially what this does is when you look at the yield management here, you'll notice that anytime your occupancy level goes above 50%, it'll adjust or increase your rates 15%. Okay. So you have the ability to go in and set these essentially yield management rules. There's no limit to the number that you want. We recommend being I would only recommend using probably about 2 to 4 initially to start, and then you can obviously massage it from there. And we did host a webinar back on yield management back in the fall that we also have posted on our YouTube channel. So we did go into a little more detail with the different yield management, the options, both within BookingCenter but also external as well. But if anyone has any questions or would like to review that in more detail, you could use that particular webinar video, but obviously our support team is here to answer any questions or review that in more detail on a one-on-one basis, as well as these specific features if needed.
Thanks, Ryan. That's great. Also, we have a question on what about setting up special rates for AAA or discounted rates, that type of thing? Would you use child rates for that?
Yeah, absolutely. You can use child rates for that. And that's typically the easiest way you want to set up discount rate programs. And that's why we have built in, when you set up a child rate, that it will actually ask you for the adjust by % or flat rate amount. And so it being a child rate or derived rate based on whatever system that you're using is setting up a AAA or discount or any other discounted, whether it be military, AAA, ARP, corporate government. We recommend setting up as a child rate because once you set up that child rate, it's linked to the parent. So the example that Dave gave with the 10% discount. So, I mean, if you have a $100 rate, it'll be discounted that 10%, accordingly. So, you literally, when you're updating your rates, once you have all of your child rates set up based on either a per dollar or percentage increase or decrease, it'll simply, like I said, because it's linked, it'll simply update accordingly. So if you're doing a 10% increase or 10% rate loading or bump on a child rate, let's say for Booking.com and Expedia, you go in and you update all your base parent rates. Those will bump up accordingly, and that rate update will automatically be pushed to those third-party channels as well. So yes, I would recommend any discount rate programs that you have to utilize the child rate feature for that.
Okay, great. Thanks, Ryan. And then Dave, would you mind giving an example of the new restriction and the difference between the closed and the arrival restrictions? Or Ryan?
Well, one example.
Yeah, sure, I can.
Ryan's still holding it. He's holding, but I can talk about it. So what you're getting here is a close to arrival. Let's say the booking is close to arrival on Monday. That means no online reservations can be made that arrive on a Monday. That's close to arrival. The closed, which is the new restriction, means that if you had a closed on a Monday, you couldn't have a booking that arrived on Sunday and departed on Tuesday, because it goes over that Monday, and that Monday is a closed day, which means you do not accept any reservations through that day or arriving on that day. So closed is a much more kind of block out, if you will, whereas the close to arrival only prevents bookings from arriving on a given day, whereas they could stay over that close to arrival day. A lot of times,
if I can just add to that, Dave,
to as closed through. Go ahead, Ryan.
Think of it, guys, yeah, the easy example I always give on the close flag is that even though it's a rate plan value, think of it as zero availability on that given day at the rate plan level. So if you're allocating, let's say, this particular child king on Friday, August 4th, essentially you have no availability on the 4th. So to Dave's point, if it was a 3-day stay for Thursday, Friday, Saturday, there's no availability for that particular room type at that rate plan level. So.
And by managing them by the rate plan level, it gives you a little more flexibility, because you may have a discounted rate that you don't want to sell on a certain day, but your regular rate would be just fine. So the discounted rate would then be closed, listed as no availability, but the regular rate would still have availability to be sold. So it just gives you a good ability to kind of cherry pick where you want to sell your lower discounted rate sometimes.
Exactly, yeah.
Excellent. Thanks, you guys. One thing that might be worth mentioning is at the top of the rate grid here, you can choose to display your different rates through the agent drop-down list there in the top header. Yeah. So you won't, if it's not allocated to the front desk, you're not going to see it unless you choose all rates, right? When you create your child rates, your OTA rates, you can see how you're allocating your rates.
Correct. As Erica mentioned, yeah, I mean, essentially this just takes the detail of your various agents. So if you look here within your agent relationship screen, this just will display all the room types and rate plans associated with each respective channel or agent. So in this case, if you wanted to view it all, you choose all rates that are in the system. But let's say you just set up your various child rates, your restrictions, and you just wanted to look at Booking.com. You could essentially just choose the Booking.com direct, and it would show just the rate plans that are associated with the Booking.com agent or channel.
Great. Thanks, Ryan. Well, if we don't have any more questions, I think we'll wrap it up. And please, everyone, feel free to call us or submit a support ticket if you have any further questions or you'd like to review anything. I'd like to thank Dave and Ryan. Great job explaining the new function and how it can be used. And I'd like to thank everybody for attending.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great afternoon, morning, evening, wherever you are in the world. And we look forward to working with you and talking with you soon.